Why, thank you. This was something that I took from his archives because I just thought it was such an interesting, the confidential
guy.
I think
What's
this
in
one.
there?
I think this one's been the original of like Rate Your Professor.
Right. Oh, that's hilarious.
I don't know.
I love that.
Anyway,
It looks very Harry Potter-esque as well.
so I'm gonna sit down.
We tried, but they hadn't got plates yet, so they decided they wanted to get food before they came to sit down, which made sense. Okay. I think you had to give them like a couple of minutes to get their food.
A number of people who got sick, as is often the case.
Yeah,
but some of the people that were, I don't know if you've met Rita Semmel yet, but she's 102. She founded the San Francisco Interfaith Council, and she's still very much strong and going. She called this morning.
Oh, no.
And I said, how is she? And this friend who brought her said, that's good. That's good because that's Rita.
Yeah.
I'm going to get my friends to come over here now. We will be.
When did you start?
And Art, you should sit up here too.
I lost my speech. Wait a minute.
You lost your speech.
It's not these two. It's not this, is it? Okay, he's fine.
All right. They go into this one.
Oh, you got it. Okay. All right. Good. You want to make sure that. Good evening and welcome. Welcome to the University of San Francisco, a wonderful community of educators and learners who are striving to be people for others and to embody a faith that does justice. My name is Chinyere Opara. I'm the Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs here at the university. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the second annual Alvin H. Baum Jr. Memorial Lecture hosted by the Swig Program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice. Tonight we come together to remember those who have come before us and those who are still here with us, elders in the work of Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. The annual Alvin Baum Jr. Memorial Lecture focuses on repairing the damage of religious-based homophobia and transphobia. And of course, we all know that this couldn't come at a more important time as we see the rise of banning of books, particularly texts that focus on humanizing LGBTQ individuals and creating a better understanding of genders and sexualities. In fact, last year, we had more banned books in 2022 than ever before. So this is an important time for us to elevate this kind of dialogue and conversation. This lecture celebrates those whose LGBTQ plus Jewish social justice activism has transformed our lives and made new ways of living and loving possible. Tonight, we honor one of the great change makers in San Francisco and California history, Senator Mark Leno. Yes. Very exciting. Tonight is a celebration of courage and of opening doors. As the first openly gay Jew in many of the spaces in which he entered, Alvin Baum created space for other LGBTQ individuals and organizations to thrive. And of course, tonight's speaker, Mark Leno, was the first openly gay man elected to the state senate. As the first black female provost at a Jesuit university, and as the first black female openly queer provost at a Jesuit university, I understand the journey they're going on. And I'm incredibly grateful to those who stood strong in their identity and their authenticity and boldly opened up the door for people like myself to also stand in our own authenticity. Of course, this evening wouldn't be possible without the support of many of you here. And in particular, I want to call out somebody who has been a staunch supporter of me in the year and a half since I joined the University of San Francisco, Rabbi Camille. Rabbi Camille, our beloved rabbi-in-residence. Rabbi Camille has built an incredible community here. Just this week, she invited me to sit in space with Breaking Bread and the Binary, an incredible community of students who are exploring, some of the students there, wave if you're part of that group, yes, who are exploring what it means to be queer, to be exploring genders and sexualities, and also to be deeply interested in questions of faith and meaning and purpose. And it was such a beautiful space where there was incredible authenticity, honesty, and openness. And I could really sense Rabbi Camille's leadership in that space, creating a space where students could really be themselves. And I think that I'm seeing some nods in the back row. I think I've captured that sense. Rabbi Camille also teaches an incredible community-engaged learning course here at the university called Queering Religion and Honoring Our LGBTQ plus Elders. And in that course, some of you have actually been in that classroom. Elders, activists from across San Francisco and the Bay Area come and engage in community with our own students. And so there's this real intergenerational connection and exchange, which is so powerful. She also organizes an off-site retreat called Spectrum, and is coordinating a 3-day conference for LGBTQ students from across the Jesuit university system. This is real change making. This is really transforming what it means to be able to go to a Jesuit Catholic institution like the University of San Francisco and be truly authentically who you are and to be embraced and affirmed for that. And it's part of this work. Yes, let's hear it. And I can truly say that I don't think that I would have had such a warm welcome had it not been for this foundational work that's been happening over many years. In fact, when I was first invited, many people said to me, Chinyere, there's this position at the University of San Francisco, and we've read the description, it just sounds like you. It's about somebody who's an intellectual and an activist. It's about somebody who leads with the head and the heart. It's about somebody who believes in social justice and who believes in inquiry and science and is also deeply driven by faith. You should apply. And I said, well, yes, but it's Catholic. Do they really want me? You know, I'm very queer and I'm very out. And there's other identities stacked on that too. And they said, just go have that conversation. And immediately I found that this is an affirming and open community. And that doesn't happen by chance. That happens by work, and that happens by courage, and certainly by some of you in this room, and by our very own rabbi-in-residence. So I'm very deeply grateful for that. I'd also like to name some other names, and I can't get through everybody, so I apologize if I don't name you. But some of the people who've really been foundational in supporting both Rabbi Camille's leadership and also this program have been. I'm so grateful that you're here today, Pam David, and her late wife, Cheryl Lazar. So we'd like to just acknowledge you and honor you. Also in the front row, Robert, we're so grateful that you're here today. And of course, Robert's beloved husband.
I'm grateful you're here.
Oh, thank you, thank you. You're passing the baton, huh? and everybody here who supported the Swig program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice. I'm just grateful for your generosity. I'm grateful for your steadfastness as you stand by those of us who are doing the work. And I'm grateful for your vision, because we are all, to a certain extent, passing the baton to the back row here, to the students. So thank you, all of you. And so I'm going to pass it over to Rabbi Camille, who will lead us through the rest of the evening. Thank you.
We have been very fortunate to have you and be as very proud in your representation of all your identities, hidden and visible. And it was a particular gift to have you with our students at Breaking Bread this week, where we learned more about you, and hope you'll come back to have lunch with us frequently. Well, welcome. I'm so grateful to see so many friends that I haven't actually seen together in this room, maybe just like this, ever before. And I am grateful that we're able to fulfill this Jewish custom that on the anniversary of someone's death, and Al's anniversary of his Yortzeit's on Tuesday, that you gather to learn something of meaning that connects you to the spirit of that loved one. And I think it's awesome that we've created this lecture series that very intentionally brings us together to learn about social justice and the work that has been done and that we need to continue to do in honor of Al's memory and legacy. And we bring Cheryl into this space because were it not for the mystery of the Shekhinah, of that divine presence, bringing us together, Pam, at the moment of your portrait with Jeanette Marcy being unveiled, where I also met Mayor Agnos for the first time in person, and sort of having all of you together feels like a homecoming of a moment that we couldn't have known would led to this. So I feel the spirit of Al and the spirit of Cheryl here amongst us today. And what's different today than last year, we have this beautiful space, and more of you have come out and will be with us tonight at our main event. But we have with us this portrait that Barbara Winkelstein, of blessed memory, painted of Al. And this is a much younger, this is Al, I think, in his late 40s, perhaps. So I want to tell you a little story that I've had the responsibility and privilege over the last year of working with Robert to determine where Al's archives should go. And I'm pleased to tell you that they're at the University of California, Berkeley's Bancroft Library in the Western, it's called the Western Judaica edition of the Magnus Collection. And as Steve Shimmons can tell you, because he and I spent a great deal of time with the materials, what was in Al's archives? And I want to tell you that it was all about his relationships with the people who made a difference, with people he had gotten to know, projects he had come to support, and who he'd taken an interest in one way or another. And so his files were very organized, and they included like 1975 and all the correspondence of his encounters that year, or his 75th birthday and all of your birthday cards and notes. And when it comes to archiving, it was like, what is this that we're bequeathing? And the archives helped me understand that 100 years from now, when students try to understand what it was to be Jewish and gay in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, they'll look and see and tell stories about the kinds of relationships that one had to cultivate over decades in order to enter into boardrooms and become entrusted leaders in organizations that would not have us prior. And Al was that man who, as you said, Provost, who opened opened the way for us and made sure that he was not going to be the last Jewish gay strategic mind to come along. So when I was at the archives, at the storage making the transfer, there was this crated portrait. There was this crated huge picture. And we knew that there had been some art that we weren't ready to give away, we'd held on to, and some of it had gone into the storage. So we pulled this big piece out, and it was like, there was a post-it on it, and it said, "Seated Man." Now, anyone who knew art collection could imagine that it might be any number of seated men, but so we got it out, and Robert was like, "I think it's his portrait." And I thought, when you told me that, I started to imagine the beautiful portrait that hung in his living room. And but anyway, seated man. And when I think of Al, whether it was in his 40s, his 50s, his 60s, 70s, 80s, he was hardly ever sitting. He had such a robust, big life that only got bigger and more satisfying with you, Robert. And to think that in the box it would say "Man of Leisure." That was another tag was on it. One side was "Seated Man," and the other was "Man of Leisure." But the last thing I want to say is that this week a professor came into the Jewish Studies office, and he saw the portrait, and he didn't know Al, but he said, "What a beautiful, beautiful picture. Look at those hands, look at those jewels, look at that face, and look at the eyes." He said, "This is a man who had a twinkle in his eyes and a little mischief." And that's so true. And those of us who knew Al knew that we were part of the correspondence he kept dear to him, and some of the reasons his eyes twinkled. And it's a beautiful gift to feel connected to him in the spirit of this evening. So I want to introduce now Pam with a few more words, who will introduce our special guest. I was thinking, how do I describe how I met you? And really what I could come up with was this poem. It's not my poem, but I think you'll understand. It's attributed to Judah Halevi. I'm not sure about that, but that's who it's attributed to. "'Tis a fearful thing. 'Tis a fearful thing to love what death can touch. A fearful thing to love, to hope, to dream, to be and oh, to lose. A thing for fools this, and a holy thing to love. For your life has lived in me, your laugh once lifted me, your word was gift to me. To remember this brings painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, a holy thing to love what death has touched." And I would say that I've been so grateful that in your period of mourning, that one of the things you've done, I think maybe as part of your living, has been to be a old, wise, lesbian teaching elder. Well, I'd like to call you an elder in my course, but that didn't work, so I had to call you a teaching elder, and then I heard this owl idea, old, wide lesbian, so okay, I'll try that out. In any case, for 2 years now, you've worked with our students and teaching them queer history, and so from the inside out, you get to see what a difference the work we're doing makes. So thank you for your ongoing support, and I invite you to join us up here.
Thank you, Rabbi. You were not supposed to make me cry. But I appreciate it, and thank you for bringing Cheryl into this room. So 2 things before I get to my former boss is number one, how delighted that I'm here and that the provost is here and that all of you are here to celebrate Al and to celebrate this rabbi-in-residence program. I had known the rabbi about this much, but when I found out that my wife had cancer at the same time that my sister and my mother had cancer, I sank to the floor in my mother's house and said, whatever they say about God only gives you what you can handle is total BS. Because I could not handle it. And as a secular Jew, never had a rabbi, never belonged to a synagogue, all I wanted was a rabbi. And it was just synchronicity that I'm at the opening of the Jeanette and Marcy part of Open House in front of this portrait that we both helped make happen. And there's the rabbi standing alone, and I'm just back from Chicago visiting my mom, who was fading, and with this terrible news that Cheryl was having to begin chemotherapy. And I walked over to her, and I said, I need you. And she turned and said, I'm there. And she was there for the whole year, 2 years we had before Cher died. That she was with me when Cher died, and she's been with me ever since. So she is so much more. She's an incredible teacher, and I've been able to experience and see that, and it's true, I've really had a little bit of a problem being called an elder, but I'm trying to get used to it. I used to be the precocious young one, and now I'm the elder, the wise elder, whatever that means. But her role here, in some ways not being connected to a synagogue, I think has been freeing for her, and I'm so appreciative of it because I had friends, not Jewish, who were part of the healing circles that we did for Cher and part of the Yahrzeit commemorations that we did, and who've said to me, I'm not Jewish, but will she be my rabbi? Including Robert, and her answer is yes. And this position at USF just reinforces that. She's the rabbi to the university. Not the only rabbi, I know, Erin, but one of them. And very grateful for her vision and her leadership and her ability to bring people together of all denominations. I think the future is interfaith. If you're going to be an organized religion, at least have it be interfaith because it makes a difference. And now I want to turn to former mayor, but I still call him Mayor, Art Agnos. In 1987, in early 1987, my cousin just arrived. I'm glad she's here. I went to a little meeting with Art and some other lesbian leaders, Roma Guy, and I don't even remember who else was in the room, and it probably was 86, because Art was talking about he was going to run for mayor, and he wanted our support. And I said, great, but then I ran off to Washington, D.C. to organize the March on Washington for Lesbian and Gay Rights, and to become Reverend Jesse Jackson's primary advisor on lesbian and gay rights during his presidential campaign. When I got back to San Francisco, I'd been an organizer on lots of issues on both sides of the Bay, but all of a sudden had gotten this directive from Reverend Jackson, which he gave to all of his top staff, to get immersed in local Democratic Party politics and run for office or be in government. And I joined a campaign to build a new ballpark and was a field organizer and met Mayor Agnos, who had been elected by that time, and a lot of the staff around him. And after that was invited to join his administration as a special assistant to the mayor at the Mayor's Office of Community Development. And I began my work there in January 1990. And what I have to say about Art as the mayor is that it's criminal that he didn't get to serve a second term. Many of us were counting on that, and You just get started in your first term if you're a visionary mayor. And the strength and courage he showed to bring down the Embarcadero Freeway and that and all the leadership he showed during and after the earthquake, the way he ran City Hall, where actually the left hand knew what the right hand was doing. I worked for 2 other mayors after Art. I can tell you it wasn't the same. There was a functional mayor, and then there was a dysfunctional mayor, and then there was a strong mayor, but honestly with Willie, there was the good Willie, and there was the evil Willie, and you never quite knew which day it was gonna be. With Art, you knew where you were. You knew what your role was as a staff person. He had a code of ethics that if you went to work for him, I think it started when you were in the assembly, got handed out to you. You are not the elected official. The relationship you as staff should have to community was like music to my ears because I was a community organizer. But that was, and I had to figure out how to be a bureaucrat and still be a community organizer. And the people that I met during Art's mayoralty, during the campaign, the re-election campaign, are still close to me because that's what happens when you have a healthy individual running for being the mayor, running for office. And one of the saddest parts was when he did not win. And he didn't win because people didn't understand what he was doing. And it got split from the left and split from the right, and he got squeezed in the middle. And it was a tragedy for San Francisco. I can't tell you how appreciative I am of the opportunity, Art, that you gave me. However, many thousands of years ago when I was just a little whippersnapper. But the Mayor's Office of Community Development manages these federal funds and provides grants to to organizations serving low-income communities all across San Francisco. I got to work in every neighborhood, on every issue. I learned how to be a grant maker. I learned how to manage the politics so you could actually have good policy. And then Art went on to become the regional administrator for HUD, which was the office most closely, we were actually more connected to HUD than we were to the mayor's office or to the city and county. And in one of the first meetings I went to with him in that capacity, my wife and I had just adopted a puppy, and Art spent the first half hour of the meeting telling me how, and describing and demonstrating how I needed to be alpha to my dog. So there's some things you just don't forget, but Art, I'm so happy that you're here. I know you knew Al a little bit, who is a dear friend of mine, and thank you for being here.
It's been a long time since I've done anything like this, so I'm taking a good look just to try to remember the excitement and the feeling of dealing with people. And tonight is a special night for me because I'm talking about one of my buddies who I admire and love. Not only as a human being, but as an extraordinary public official. Some people were asking me tonight, what have you been doing? And at 85, I say to them, anything I want to. Anything I want to. And I wanted to do this because it's so special. And Provost, I thank you for your support. I know there's a lot of things that happen at this university. I worked with Leo McCarthy, one of my mentors, to create the McCarthy Center years ago, and the university welcomed it and did an extraordinary job in creating and making this making it a very viable educational component to this university. This is even better because of what it means. And so I'm very proud and pleased to be here and salute the university, salute all of you for your extraordinary contributions that have made this work. And I want to remember Mel Swig, who I also knew and worked with closely about issues in San Francisco. He would love this, because in 1977, I got to put my glasses on, that's an 85-year-old thing. This university became the first one in America to create the social justice and the Jewish and social justice educational system here in San Francisco, the program here in San Francisco, the first one in the country. And some people think elsewhere. And then in 2019, some 42 years later, USF again broke new ground with the establishment of the rabbi-in-residence program here in conjunction with the Swig social justice program. First one, not only in America, but in the world. In the world, the first one. Extraordinary, extraordinary. And knowing Pam and so many of you that I've had a chance to greet in the short time I've been here tonight, it feels like a homecoming for me, even though I've never been to this particular program. Mel would, as I say, be so proud of what is happening here and how we need it today in this fractious world. How we need it. Alvin Baum was not only a leader for Jews and gays, he was a leader for all of San Francisco and indeed the greater society that we all live here in the Bay Area. I met him shortly after I arrived in San Francisco and learned so much about him, not only about gay rights issues, which he talked about, but urban planning, social services, civil rights, politics. Mark always refers to him as a Renaissance man, and indeed he was. This memorial lecture series also honors Rabbi Camille Shira Angel, who was, as you've heard, so important, not only to Robert, but to Pam, and also Alvin himself, as well as Cheryl Lazar, as they went through their time with their illnesses. I had not met Rabbi Angel until tonight, as she said, but being a sharp politician, a little bit anyway, left, I checked last year's Instagram program to see who she was. And I fell in love with her like everybody else does. But I must confess, I want to be honest, she's not the only one I'm in love with here. Pam David is someone who, as you heard, came to work with me when I was mayor in the middle of my term. If she had come in the first year, I probably would have won that re-election. But she was special. She started as a special assistant and moved up and soon became one of the dominant policy advisors in my staff. She was a star almost from the beginning, and as you heard, a couple of other mayors quickly realized it when I left the mayor's office. And they kept her on to their advantage. And together with Robert, who I don't know that well, but certainly have come to know him as I've spent time with the people who are closest to him. And this dynamic man joined with Pam to be the spark plugs that have continued to promote Al's essence. In fact, he was described to me by people who know better, because they knew both of them together as a couple, as the yin to Al's yang, because they suited each other in the different ways that they interacted and made it work. Last year, as you heard, this series featured Dr. Marcy Edelman. You know how I know her? Mark introduced me. In 1998, when I was the Western Center Regional Director for HUD, I noticed that we didn't have any housing planned or working for elder gay folks who have a special set of circumstances when they age, especially this generation, which hasn't had the benefit of what is taught here and is talked about here, but had some of the old attitudes that didn't make it that comfortable. And so it was important that we create a place for elder gays. And Mark said, I got just the person. I called him up. He was on the Board of Supervisors then. And I called him up, and I said, Mark, I'm all over this Western region, 5 states, and we have nothing for elder gays. He says, I got just the person for you. And he introduced me to Marcy and her late partner, wife, Jeanette Gurvich. And together we started, and it took a while. It took a while. But history was made. And if you want to see it, go down to 55 Laguna, and you'll see the best. Now, I'll have more to say about Mark when I speak to the broader audience. But I've been listening and hearing how important all of you are. So I'm going to, frankly, with the money that makes this go. And so I want to share with you the best religious story of my 40-year career. You're going to love it. So it starts this way. One of the challenges that I had as mayor was trying to be normal, because nobody treats you normally. Positive or negative, they don't treat you normally. And so we struggled to try to have moments of normalcy with our family. So for example, when you're the mayor, you'll always have bodyguards with you because of the tragic history in our city. So it messes up the sociology of the family. What I mean by that is normally when you go out, dad's driving, mom's on the passenger side, the kids are in the back, and if the kids start to act up or fuss, you can turn around and say, knock it off or you're going to get it when you go home. But you can't do that when there's a cop in the car driving, and the sociology is the cop drives, I'm in the passenger side with the communications equipment, and Sherry, my wife's in the back with the kids. So you can't really be normal. So every once in a while, we tell a lie to the bodyguards, usually on a Sunday night, and say, we're not going out tonight. And they wouldn't have to come and watch us. So we'd sneak out with a normal way and go over to my mother's house for a Greek dinner on Sunday night. And then one night in February 1990, we're coming back, and Sherry remembers that we don't have any milk for breakfast the next morning for the kids, who were about 8 and 4. So I said, well, take them upstairs to the house. I'll go get the milk. And I did. And I'm on my way back from one of the corner stores, and the phone, in those days it was right, down here, it didn't have the cells that we have. And it's Sherry on the phone saying, Art, Mother Teresa's walking up the stairs to the house. Mother Teresa's walking up the stairs to the house. This is Sunday night at about 9 o'clock at night. And she's getting the kids ready for bed. So she says, what do I do? I said, well, are you serious? She says, yeah. She's got 2 nuns with her. Well, bring her in. Let her in the house. I'll be right there with the milk. So I got there a few minutes later, and there she is. Just like what's in all of your minds right now. Mother Teresa and 2 nuns on my couch. Hello, Mother. What brings you here? Now, she spoke good English, but had a very soft voice. So you really had to get close. And she says, I have come to talk to you about the work of God. All right, Mother, I'll sit down. Sherry's running upstairs to try to get the kids in their Sunday clothes to come down and meet her. They don't want to come. So she proceeded to tell me about a building on the corner of Turk and Fillmore that she had found with her nuns that were accompanying her, that she wanted to convert into a homeless facility. Her order already had several of them in the city. And it was abandoned and nobody knew who owned it. So someone suggested it might be owned by the city. She said, well, where's the mayor live? I'll go ask him. And that's how she wound up at my house Sunday night at 9 o'clock. And I said, well, Mother, I think I know the building you're talking about. It's an old brick building. It's been abandoned. I think it's owned by the Public Utilities Commission, but I'll find out tomorrow morning and get right on it. She says, the work of God cannot wait until tomorrow morning. What do you have in mind, Mother? We must go now. Now? Mother, it's 10 o'clock at night. It's cold, it's dark, it's February. That neighborhood can be a little sketchy. She says, do not fear. God will protect us. So just to make sure God protected us, I called for my 2 bodyguards who were there in a flash. You know, we used to have a red phone there. And they were there in a flash, and we left 2 of them, and we left one of them there because Sherry wanted to come with us. And so off we went, bodyguard, me, Mother Teresa, Sherry, and then the 2 nuns driving her car. Go down to the corner of Fillmore and Turk, and we're looking at this building. It's still there, and we're trying to figure it out. There's no sign, there's nothing that indicates it's a city-owned building, so we walked around the corner, around the side to the back, where there was a chain link fence with a hole in it. So we walked through the chain link fence and came to the back of the building, and there is a barrel with a fire in it with about 8 or 9 homeless guys sitting around trying to keep warm on this wintry night. They see us coming, and I said, hey guys, it's the mayor. What are you doing here? I said, well, I brought somebody famous to see you. They look and they see her. It's Mother Teresa. What are you doing here? Now, keep in mind, folks, it's about 10:30, 11:15 at night in the Fillmore. And we said, well, we're trying to figure out who owns this building because Mother Teresa wants to create a homeless facility here. Well, the city owns it, but we've been living here for the last 5 years because it's been abandoned. So I turned to Mother Teresa. I said, well, there you go, Mother. It's owned by the city, and tomorrow morning I'll get right on it and see if we can't make this work. I'm just a little concerned about the seismic issues and all that kind of stuff, but we will make it work, either here or somewhere else. She says, thank you very much. We're heading back to the cars. And as we just about get ready, she's got her car, I've got my car. And she says, I say, Mother, can I ask you a question? She says, yes, what is it? I said, well, do you do this often? She says, what's that? I said, well, do you go to mayor's houses late on Sunday night and ask for buildings like this? She says, yes. I do it all the time. She knew who she was. She didn't flaunt it, but it just came out. So here we are in the Fillmore at 11 o'clock saying goodbye at the cars. And I said, do you do this often? And she says, yeah. And so I said, well, who was the last mayor you did it to? She thinks a moment. Remember, this is back in 1990. She thinks for a moment. She says, Mayor Koch in New York. Ed Koch was the mayor then. And she says, you know, he has a much nicer house than you do. Does anybody not know that Gracie Mansion is provided by the city of New York, right? And she had a little smile on her face. So I said, oh, you like to tease, huh? Just little smile. So I said, well, you know, Mother, I don't do these things for free, you know. She says, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm going to do you a favor with this building. You got to do me a favor. And she says, yes, what is it? She understood. Shoot, right back. So I said, well, Sherry's working on a First Lady project that will house, in those days, we didn't have a fentanyl epidemic, we had a crack cocaine epidemic, and we had a lot of women of color, especially, becoming addicted, pregnant, and giving birth to babies that were born sick from the first moment. And so we knew that if we could get the babies and the women off of drugs during pregnancy, they could give birth to a healthy baby. And so Sherry was raising, as a First Lady project, several $1 million in order to create this facility, which we were trying to put out in the Bayview where most of the epidemic was. And so I said, well, when the next time you come to San Francisco, Mother, I'd like to show you Sherry's First Lady project. And she says, and I described it to her, and she says, let's go now. Let's go now. It's 11:15, but she says, let's go now. So I called the hospital, San Francisco General, and I said, this is the mayor. I'm coming with Mother Teresa right now. You can imagine what happens at 11:30 at night at San Francisco General, and who's there? It ain't the high-priced personnel. It's the working class, mostly Latino, Latina, and a lot of ethnic people who are working that late shift. So we get there, and they're waiting, and we go up to the neonatal unit where Mother Teresa blesses about 13 babies who were in that nursery withdrawing from drugs at a day old. And she reached in there and left her relic that she gave to everyone and left it by their heads. And then we went down to the AIDS ward, and she left another relic and blessed each one of those guys with the same thing. And we started walking out, and the old San Francisco General Hospital had a large lobby about like this. And we're walking out, saying our goodbyes, and I happen to turn around, and there's about 100 people following us because of who she was. And so she turned and said this to them, and I've burned it in my memory, even though it was that long ago. She said, when you all die and go to heaven, God's going to be waiting for you. And thank you for what you're doing for these sick babies and these sick men. Because in taking care of them, you're taking care of his son, Jesus Christ. Those people bent down and just realized that for these difficult, thankless jobs, they were being told they're going to heaven by a future saint. It was truly magnificent. And a story that I've never forgotten that I think best captures the same kind of spirit that is happening right here. And so I thank you all for what you're doing and for the support you give and the university gives to this particular function that is a part of the Swig program for Jewish and social justice. And I hope that it grows and grows the way Mother Teresa grew with her service and became a saint. Thank you very much.
Robert, do you want to say a word? Just a little bit. Really short. So we're just about to conclude and move over to the Marashi at the From Hall, and I invite you to, but let's hear, I told Robert, I asked Robert, he would say just a brief word.
It's going to be very brief. You know, I have to be honest with you, this year is much harder than last year was. And I realize why. I was talking to Mason about this, who, just a little sidestep, I had the honor of going to one of Camille's classes this year, and it's one that she had Mason Funk from Outwards as a lecturer, and it was fantastic. The enthusiasm the students brought, and also the wisdom and significant work that Mason brought, just warmed my heart, and Camille made it happen. Camille also was really instrumental in getting Al's archives situated. And I'm very grateful to her for that, because he's got a place that honors who he was and what he did. The reason I said this year is harder is because I think last year, you know, I was in the midst of trying to deal with the estate. I was trying to get things sold. I was trying to get things positioned. This year, I've kind of just been sitting more with the loss of Al, you know, and you said that I brought a lot to him. I've got to tell you, he turned my life around. He made my life something magnificent. We had a magnificent life together. You know, there was some tension. We were very different, but we were also soulmates, and we were fantastic together. And I just have to say I'm extremely honored to be able to carry on his legacy, and it's with many of you. So I want to thank you all for being here. And I've got to tell you, Pam David has been my rock, and I love her dearly. Thank you all. Thank you, Mark.
Well, Robert, you and Pam and your friends and loved ones are changing lives one student at a time, one class at a time, one breaking bread luncheon and retreat at a time. And you'll have a chance to hear from some of their questions and meet them in just a few minutes. So the plan from here is to grab some fruit, grab some cheese, make sure you take a little food with you. There's still plenty of food. And the walk is maybe 5 minutes. You'll go and find From Hall. It's in the large room, the Marashi room. There's also a live stream link. If you have friends who couldn't make it tonight, it's not too late to send them the link so they can tune in. Hi, my sister in Chicago is watching us right now. So just so grateful to have this, and thank you for beginning what a special evening and occasion this is. See you over there. Robert, you'll like this. I have all my binding notes. Slide.
Awesome.
Testing.
All right.
Okay. In
And,
fact, I'll put that slide.
Hello? Hi, if everyone could take their seats, that would be lovely. So then we can get going.
The Swig program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice of the University of San Francisco acknowledges our presence on the unceded land of the indigenous Ohlone communities and pays our respects to these traditional caretakers and elders, past, present, and emerging. It is our intention that this acknowledgement plays a role, however infinitesimal, in a much larger process of confronting the past in order to create a not yet realized future rooted in justice.
Welcome, everyone. I'm going to stay down here. Welcome, everyone, to the University of San Francisco's Swig program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice's second annual Alvin H. Baum Jr. Memorial Lecture, where in memory and honor of Al Baum and Cheryl Lazar, we annually honor an LGBTQ+ Jewish social justice activist.
My name is Camille Angel, and it's my honor and privilege to serve as the first rabbi-in-residence at USF and to teach in the Swig program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice.
And I'm Aaron Hahn Tapper. I direct the Swig program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice and get to work with Rabbi Angel, Orn Kroll-Zeldin, and a bunch of other magnificent people.
Before introducing tonight's event, let us tell you a little bit about the University of San Francisco, USF, as well as our extraordinary Jewish Studies and Social Justice program. Founded in 1855, USF is the city of San Francisco's first university, a premier Jesuit Catholic school. In 1977, we became the first Catholic institution in the world to endow a Jewish studies program. Some 30 years later, in 2008, we became the first university of any kind, Catholic and otherwise, to have an academic program formally linking Jewish studies and social justice. And in 2019, we added yet another first to our renowned history by forming a new position on campus, that of rabbi-in-residence. I imagine you'll agree there's never been a better time in history to serve as the first lesbian rabbi in residence at a Catholic university. I teach 2 classes, Queering Religion and Honoring Our LGBTQIA+ Religious Elders. I have the divine work of supporting queer folk on their queer journeys and Jews on their Jewish journeys, and, well, frankly, everyone else, because everyone needs a rabbi, so consider me yours. And consider yourself invited to our Interfaith Passover Seder in 2 weeks, Tuesday, April 11th at 6:30 p.m. This year, we're using an anti-racism Haggadah, and we're going to go deep. It will be led by my students, our resident minister, Glendy Alvarez, and my new wonderful colleague in university ministry, the Reverend Dr. Ronnie Sims.
As trailblazers in formally linking Jewish studies with social justice, we're excited to announce today that for the first time, we're launching a new program that expands our student communities. This August, we're launching our first graduate-level certificate program in JEDI. That's Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and JSSJ. JEDI plus JSSJ. This program will allow professionals to power their careers with the tools to implement systemic change around anti-oppression, social justice, and human rights in professional contexts, learning from experienced and renowned educators and change makers. These certificate holders will emerge as real JEDI masters. Hold for applause. Oh. On Jewish studies and social justice, systemically infused with JEDI values, developed to train professionals to work within, between, and beyond Jewish identified communities. The official announcement about our new certificate program is forthcoming, and we would appreciate your support in helping us get the word out to the community. Your support advances our growth in an effort to make a real difference. Through the Swig JSSJ program, we believe that education is the best way to make long-term systemic change. Whether one has the time to take a semester-long course or a mere few hours to hear from a single speaker, education is fundamental to making our world better, paramount in shining the spotlight on the margins, on oppressed communities who are mistreated merely because of their race, ethnicity, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or another social identity altogether.
USF is a remarkable place. Our tagline, "Change the World from Here," is the real deal. With approximately 10,000 undergraduate and graduate students, U.S. News and World Report reports that we are the #1 most diverse campus in the country in terms of racial and ethnic makeup. An educational institution where a third of our undergraduates are the first in their families to attend college. We estimate that 10% of our student body identify as Jewish and more than 25% identify as queer. 2 years ago, USF made the wise choice of bringing Provost Chinray Opara to be our provost and to lead and inspire us to curate for us a transformative educational set of opportunities. She is doing so with integrity and eloquence, and birthing justice in this crisscross paths of this diverse universe we call USF. Please welcome Provost Chinua Opara to the podium.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rabbi Camille. What beautiful words. Thank you so much, Professor Tapper. What an incredible evening. Just look around for a moment. This is an incredible space. We are coming together at the intersections of social justice struggles. The Swig program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice really helps us to think about the ways in which faith intersects with race and class and gender and genocide, colonization, indigeneity, immigrant status, all of the ways in which we hold these multiplicity of identities. Here at the University of San Francisco, we are a beloved community of educators and learners who are coming together in this context of a faith that does justice, to seek to be people with and for others. And so we think about the ways in which we are with you and with ourselves. It was harder some years ago to be able to be authentically who you are in this kind of a space. Today we're going to hear about and hear from some of those trailblazers who opened up doors so that others of us could come through and stand in our own authentic selves. For myself, I think about what would it have been like to come here at a time as a provost, as a black female provost, as a first black female queer provost at a Jesuit university. To be here 30 years ago would have been unimaginable. And yet, the building blocks were put in place by some of the people that we're here about and hear from today. We're here in a lecture series that honors Alvin Baum, who was an incredible change maker here in the city of San Francisco, and also somebody who was deeply beloved. He was somebody who opened up doors, who looked at the work that people could do at the grassroots and thought about ways in which, and practiced ways of supporting and funding that work. He opened up doors, and he built around him a community that continues into today and has made this series, this lecture series, a legacy of his work. We're also going to hear today from another first, the first gay, outwardly gay state senator, Mark Leno, who's here with us tonight. We're so excited. How courageous to stand boldly and authentically and say, yes, I am something that actually in this country for centuries has been despised, and yet I am proud, and I can stand here and I can let you know, the next generation, right, our students who are coming forward, just be yourselves. It's going to be okay. So this is an incredible, incredible space. I think about that timeline that was shown on the screen earlier, and I think about the ways in which we're going to be adding to that timeline. Well, we can already put on there, we have Rabbi Camille, the first lesbian Jewish rabbi here at the University of San Francisco, so we can add to the timeline 2021. I think I'm going to put myself on there. But our students are going to be adding to this timeline. That's what makes me the most excited, and I'm so excited that so many of them are here tonight. So we're grateful for your presence, for your ongoing support. This work couldn't have...
A brilliant strategic direction in politics and philanthropy have shaped our country's landscape in countless ways. And Cheryl Lazar had the very best of you. To the co-hosts, benefactors, and friends, more than 100 individuals and organizations that are listed in our program, may you be fruitful and multiply in your efforts to repair the world. And thank you to our JSSJ Assistant Director, Oren Kroll-Zeldin, the staff at USF, especially Victoria Farlow, our JSSJ Program Assistant, the Office of Development, and the Office of Communications. Thank you to President Fitzgerald, Provost Opara, and my colleagues at University Ministry, including our Director, Angelica Quinones, and our University Chaplain, who's here with us this evening, Donald Godfrey. Thank you for supporting this body of sacred work. Thanks also go to the elders in our community, Jay Cohen, Lisa Scher, Joss Eldridge, and Sandra Marilyn, Kathleen Archambault, Sam Dennison, Pam David, Dr. Marcy Edelman, Mark Leno, Charlie Spiegel, and Mike Shriver. Mike Shriver. You are a striver, though. If you are an LGBTQ elder and here with us tonight, will you rise as you're able so we can honor you and applaud you if you're here as a. And a special thanks to Mason Funk. Thank you for your archival work without words, which enables us to hear a few words from our benefactor from on high, Alvin Baum.
I came out as a gay man in 1975. Before that, I had some girlfriends. It wasn't obvious, it wasn't easy, it didn't fit me, but that's what I did. I thought that's what I had to do. Well, I was very closeted. I would go to the parks and pick up somebody and have sex, but I never told them my name, or if I did, I gave them a fake name. In 1972, Jim Foster was the first out gay man to address the Democratic political convention. That was a turning point in this country. He was a friend of mine, and that changed me. And then I decided I really needed to do something about this, and I started going to therapy. And then I had a
So imagine the trickle down takes a while because it's on the books to make it happen. And it's because of Mark Leno. This California law ensures, this is your words, Mark, that the historical contributions of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people and people with disabilities are accurately and fairly portrayed in instructional materials, educational textbooks, and the social studies curricula by adding LGBT people to the existing list of underrepresented cultural and ethnic groups already included in the state's inclusionary education requirements. Here at USF, we bring to life this anti-oppressive pedagogy, which insists on enabling us to see ourselves represented in all our rainbow beauty. My students can attest to the difference it makes to learn queer history from those people who made it. Last semester, Mark was a teaching elder in our Honoring Our LGBTQIA plus Religious Elders CEL, Community Engaged Learning course. He was paired with 3 students with whom he met every week for 14 weeks and taught them about LGBTQ history and community, Jewish values, and social justice. Mark's service is exemplary. As history will be told, he will be remembered for having made this great city and state a truly more righteous place. And now, the honor of introducing you, Mayor Art. Art Agnos served as San Francisco's 39th mayor from 1988 to 1992. While he was mayor, he established policies to open access for middle-income families, communities of color, and the LGBTQ community. He's been a longtime friend and ally to Jews and many of our concerns. Art, you mentioned how this feels like a homecoming, as you've known everyone here at USF, including our original benefactor, Mel Swig. Mayor Agnos was asked by California State Assemblyman Leo T. McCarthy to join his staff in January 1968. McCarthy was elected Speaker of the Assembly in '74, and Art became his chief of staff. During this period, Agnos helped obtain the first California state funding for community-based mental health services, serving the lesbian and gay community.
I salute the University of San Francisco for its extraordinary commitment to this series and the Mel Swig Jewish Studies and Justice program. As you heard, it's the first in the country in 1977 to create that program. And even more phenomenally, this university created in some 42 years later the rabbi-in-residence program. You young guys and gals ought to be very proud of your college, of your university. And you ought to brag about it everywhere you go, to what an progressive university ought to be. They got some issues, but they are the best. They got the best. So I was delighted to have a chance to introduce my buddy, Mark Leno, and I was on my way over here, and I wasn't sure, so I was where I was going because of some of the new facilities that have been created for these kinds of events, and I wasn't paying attention to where I was going, and I went through a stop sign. I slowed down, but I didn't stop. Now, the cops are supposed to be, as we read the paper, all downtown, watching Union Street and working at Tenderloin and much more important issues, but I look in the back of my rearview mirror, and the red light is on, and it's a San Francisco police officer stopping me and says, "Can I have your license and registration?" I was hoping, because he was sort of middle-aged, maybe, no luck, he starts writing. So I thought I'd give him a hint. Because I really don't like to just say, "Do you know who I am?" I mean, that's not my style. So I said, "You know, I had lunch with Willie Brown last week." Kept writing. And next week, I'm hoping to see Speaker Emeritus Pelosi at an event. Kept on writing. And finally, I said, "I'm going to speak tonight for a very important San Franciscan, former Senator Mark Leno." By that time, he finished writing the ticket. And he says, "You know, Mr. Agnos, you seem to know a lot of important people in this city, but you really ought to get to know Ed Hawkins." "Ed Hawkins? Who's he?" He says, "That's me." And he walked away. Anyone who has paid any attention to community life in our beloved city of San Francisco or our state of California, or for that matter, this country, has felt the impact of Mark Leno's work. He is the grandson of Russian Jewish immigrants who was born and raised in a loving family in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. After high school, he entered the University of Colorado. He didn't do so well there, which was remarkable, but he left after a year. He didn't really connect to it, and moved to Jerusalem, where he entered the American College in Jerusalem, and he was a star as the valedictorian of his class and got his BA there. From there, he spent a couple of years in rabbinical studies at Hebrew Union College in New York before he decided to move to San Francisco at the suggestion of his beloved sister. The freedom of San Francisco was a game changer for a young man who had come out at the age of 18 at a time when being gay was a crime and considered a mental disorder. It was not as easy for Mark. His religious beliefs and prayer sustained him, strengthened him. And it was a very simple prayer he showed me, told me. "I am made according to thy will." That simple is what gave him that kind of strength. And that journey led him to volunteer to help those with no voice even before he was elected. But for 18 years as a member of the Board of Supervisors here in San Francisco, the State Assembly, the State Senate, he stood up for those with no voice. He always said that his 100%, his work, was driven by economic and social justice. He often explains his commitment. He probably will tonight. I can honestly tell you that my commitment emanates from my Jewish background and the philosophy of tikkun olam. Did I say it right, Mark? Means repair of the world. What a magnificent phrase. Repair of the world. However, he did not repair anything for people he helped. He did it with them so that they could be empowered as they moved through their lives. And it was not restricted to his own immediate gay constituency. It was for everyone who needed him, sometimes even his critics, because he's the kind of person who did not hold those kinds of prejudices against people who had prejudice against him. Listen to a few highlights from his work. California Universal Health Care Act, Airline Passenger Bill of Rights, fair education to include, as you heard, LGBT and disabled people in social science history curriculums. Harvey Milk Day in California, making it the first one in the country. Digital privacy rights of California citizens, increase the state's minimum wage, limit and restrict the use of solitary confinement in juvenile facilities, addition of electronic cigarettes to the state's existing smoke-free laws, pushing for solar panels on public infrastructure, requiring cities to include walking and bicycling in their general plans for development. Clean Money and Fair Elections Act to bring public financing to political campaigns. And that's just a sampling of what this man did. Look at the awards that recognized that work. And this is only a partial list. The American Heart Association, Parents and Friends and Lesbians of Gays, American Foundation for AIDS Research, Lesbian and Gay Lawyers of LA, California Attorneys for Criminal Justice, Kamala Harris Leadership Award, Consumer Attorneys of California, Electronic Frontier Association, Northern California Innocence Project, Mental Health Association of San Francisco, and that's just a partial list. A smattering of the work that he has done to live up to his religious tradition that has inspired and motivated him. Tikkun Olam, repair the world. It's a wonderful concept. It's one that I'm going to keep with me the rest of my life. Mark had a very special relationship with Al Baum. Throughout his career, Al was Mark's sounding board, his wise counsel, and major supporter. He often referred to Al as a Renaissance man for all the things that Al did in human rights, the environment, gay rights, Jewish community, arts community, city planning, and philanthropy. My friends, I'm here to say to you tonight, so is Mark Leno. He is also a Renaissance man, and I can hardly wait to hear from him. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our speaker tonight, Mark Leno.
That was great, Art. If long. You gave half my presentation. We're running 20 minutes late already, and I haven't started. So I hope you'll bear with me as I adjust what I'll be able to say in my limited time. And any number of names have already been mentioned by the rabbi, but I have a desire to restate in terms of my thanks and appreciation to the University of San Francisco, to President Fitzgerald, to our provost, who's so articulate and magnificent, thank you, and to Erin Hahn Tapper for supporting the rabbi in the remarkable work she does. And Rabbi Angel, we're friends, we're old buddies, but to work with you in this capacity here in your program, I hope everyone understands, and I know the students do, and what an honor it was to have a number of you as my students this past year. You're changing lives. These are classes that you will remember for the rest of your life. I went through university. I don't remember that many classes. Yours, you remember to see a number of these legacy videos that the class members were assigned to make of their teaching elder, when they were presented, the students were in tears. It was that emotional for them. One young lesbian who had come out to her family and was told that, well, if you proceed in your life as such, expect to live alone, to be lonely. You'll never have love. You'll never have a relationship. But this young woman's teaching elder was Pam David. And Pam shared with her class her love for her recently deceased Cheryl Lazar. And for the first time, this young lesbian realized her parents were wrong and she could have love in her life. And she wanted to be like Pam David. That's what you're doing here, opening hearts and minds. It's astounding. And so we are all so indebted to you. Sissy Swig, thank you for being here tonight. This is such an honor. It really is. So it's an honor to be following Marcy Edelman as the second honoree to speak at this Al Baum Memorial Lecture Series. And Al, of course, was a dear friend and a teacher and a mentor to me, and you've heard a lot about him tonight. And we all miss him greatly, but what a legacy he leaves in the hands of Robert Holgate, who is taking it all to next levels. So thank you, Robert. I was to talk about my life, which Art has already done for me. And so you've saved me some time, because there are other things I want to talk about as well. But if there is a theme to it, and I know I'm speaking to many people here tonight, but mostly it's a presentation to the students, that as challenging and as dark as these days can appear, and I won't have to list the litany of things that are staring planet Earth in the face right now, and some of the ugly and hateful politics that are coming out of one of our political parties. And excuse me if I get partisan, but that's who I am. I'm a partisan Democrat. But I want to tell you, there's reason for hope, real reason for hope. And Harvey Milk spoke a lot about hope. Among his quotes was that hope is the ability to see that there is light despite all of the darkness. So that's what we want to pierce through tonight. As Art mentioned, I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, grandson of Russian immigrants, and I don't have a lot of drama or heartache to share about how difficult growing up was, because I came from a loving family. Wonderful parents, two beautiful, exquisite sisters, Janet and Jamie, with whom I'm best friends to this day, and so fortunate to have them in my life. So left Milwaukee to go off to University of Colorado, and subsequently back to the University of Wisconsin, and then my last 3 semesters at the American College in Jerusalem. And then off to rabbinical school with a mandatory first-year program in Jerusalem before going back to New York. And in my second year of what is a 5-year graduate program, I figured out that wasn't going to be my life's path. And so I am a rabbinic dropout. And moved to San Francisco. Within a year, I started a business, a sign company, which I still have today, 45 years later. And it gives me some street cred to say I'm a small business owner, and I love the business very much. And something my father told me, he was also entrepreneurial and was a business owner and a businessman himself. He said, one of the joys of being in business for yourself is you never know who's going to walk through your door tomorrow. And sure enough, on May 20th of 1980, a young man named Douglas Jackson walked in my door, and There is such a thing as love at first sight. And we had 10 remarkable years together before he died of AIDS in 1990. And yes, that is traumatic, and the epidemic was devastating in ways that words can't describe, and I know many people here tonight have lived through that with me. Our community suffered greatly, and we learned from all of that. I want to talk about 4 prayers that have stayed with me from my rabbinical days. And my students know about these prayers. I've shared them, and Art shared one of the 4. But I'm going to go into them just briefly because I want to talk a little bit about a couple pieces of my legislation that I think are appropriate and meaningful to the program we're here tonight to honor. 4 prayers that are, I guess you could call them mantras. And if you ask me what do I believe prayer is and who's listening to prayers and what power or meaning they have, I can't know that. None of us can know that. But I can tell you it keeps me mentally and spiritually on track every day throughout the day. So these just keep going through my head, and I hope you'll understand them as I describe them. So without getting too pedantic, Hebrew prayers all have a prefix. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. That's the first part, just about all prayers in the Hebrew tradition. Translation being, blessed are you, creator of the universe. And then the prayer continues. So the first one is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. The meaning of it is Shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. And that translation is, who has given us life and sustained us and brought us to this time, this place. So it is a prayer of gratitude and a reminder from where we've come and where we are, and has meaning just at any moment of any day, good or bad moments. Take note that it's an uncommon prayer because it is declined in the first person plural, which means who has given us life and sustained us and brought us to this time and place. So it speaks of community. It's not about me, it's about us. Thank you, Creator, for giving us all of this. So there's also that wealth and warmth of recognizing that we are all bound together. A prayer of gratitude. And when you think about it, you can't do better with than gratitude, because if we are appreciative of all that has been given to us, and if you start to list it, it's astounding, and how quickly it can be taken away in any second. So it's all very precious stuff. Thank you. Second prayer is same prefix. The rest being Shehakol Nehiyeh Bidvaro, according to whose word all things will be. Well, that's a curious prayer. What about self-determination? Don't we have any choices? It's really all determined by this Creator that we struggle to understand. But that's our paradox as human beings, isn't it? Yes, we do get to make choices. And as the next generation coming into adulthood, it's important that wise choices are made, life-sustaining choices, good habits, life-sustaining habits. Everything's a habit in life. Is it a life-sustaining habit or a habit that's going to drag us down and interfere with what we want to do and where we want to go? But at the same time, you just have to look at the earthquakes and the floods and the fires and the drought and all the possibilities that are beyond our control in many ways. So there is this paradox, but that's a part of our existence. The third prayer, and this is the one that Art had touched on. I'm going to digress just a moment because, Art, I didn't thank you appropriately, not only for the introduction, but for being you and for your great leadership to our city. What an extraordinary mayor Art Agnos was, an extraordinary man he continues to be, and even more than that, and greater than that is his friendship, for which I'm appreciative. A rare man. Thank you very much. So this third prayer, blessed are you, creator of the universe, who has made me according to thy will. Now, there are historical reasons which I won't go into, which many of the rabbis in the room understand. But for me, as a young man who came out at age 18 in 1969, yes, I defined myself as a Stonewall baby, that prayer meant a lot because, as we know, more so over 50 years ago, but certainly still today, I won't mention their names because they're not worthy of hearing out loud, but the messages were so negative from government and from elected officials and from our churches and synagogues, from our teachers, from our families, our elders. It was all negative. Big mistake. As if we had a choice, and that it's all wrong in every sense of the word. And to read in a book, a prayer book, who has made me according to thy will. No mistake here. I'm the way I'm supposed to be. That meant everything to me as an 18-year-old, and it means everything to me as a 71-year-old. I remind myself multiple times during the day, one of my 4 prayers. And the last one is a good bookend to the first because it's also a prayer of gratitude. And that translates to, blessed are you, creator of the universe, who has provided for me all of my needs. She'asali kol tzarki, all of my needs. A prayer of gratitude, but think of it. And I have to remind myself after I say it to myself, are those just words that you really believe that, Leno? Because if I do, think of what that means. That whatever I'm facing in my day, whatever's challenging in my life, I'm not lacking. I've got it within me. It has been provided by this Creator. All of my needs have been provided, so it's there. But think also that we live in this consumer capitalistic society. Every message we get from the marketplace, all the advertising, every billboard, every television commercial is telling us we're lacking something and you need to buy this so you're no longer lacking it. We're too tall, we're too short, we're too thin, we're too fat, we're too young, we're too old. Our teeth aren't wide enough and we've got bad breath. It just goes on. And those are negative messages, but that's how they sell things. So to remind myself, again, that it's all been provided sufficiently. If I really believe that, well, that every day is just pure joy. And bow down and say thank you once again. So, there are a couple of, well, I've got to preface the legislation. People ask me, how'd you become a state senator? Small business owner, state senator, how'd that happen? So just brief story. It really all has to do with fundraising. You may not see the connection, but that's, as my business began to grow by the mid-1980s and I was able to get out of my office, I somewhat naturally gravitated to volunteer and get involved in community service. Of course, it was the height of the epidemic. There was no shortage of work to be done. And I found a very dangerous thing about myself, that I had a facility for fundraising. Dangerous because then everyone wants you on their board of directors because no one likes to raise the money. I did. And you might wonder, what was that about? Where did that come from? I have a very clear memory, more than a clear memory, a visceral memory of being in the 4th grade Hebrew class, 10 years old, and every year of Hebrew class, 4 years prior to the bar mitzvah in 8th grade, around this time of year, right before Passover, we had a contest. Which student could sell the most kosher Bartlett's chocolate candy? And the winner of the contest won a transistor Magnavox radio, the height of technology of the day. And it even had an earplug extension, which meant I had this little piece of technology that I could sneak into my bed and listen to the Milwaukee Braves baseball game when I was supposed to be asleep. So I was motivated to win this contest. So most of my classmates sold a box to the house on the left and a box to the house on the right and called it a day. And my father, as I told you, being entrepreneurial, said, no. You take out the congregational directory and you start at A and you finish at Z. And you can imagine how charmed these congregants were that Manny and Esther Leno's son just called us to buy some chocolate candy. And he's in a contest, so of course we want to help him out. And I'd say, could you buy a box or two? Every once in a while, the response would be saying, Mark, I'll take 10 boxes. Oh, such a sweet feeling of validation and vindication. And that leap forward to the Magnavox radio. Well, I won, of course. But jump forward to 1985 when I'm selling tickets to the Human Rights Campaign dinner or to the AIDS Foundation dinner, and I'm selling tables and tickets, and when someone said, yeah, I'll take 5, it was the same feeling. The exact, and I loved it. And so I just enjoyed it all so very much. Someone once said, Leno, you are, I'll take your dinner ticket. You are such a salesman. You could sell anything to anybody. Well, I took it as a compliment, but I thought, well, if that's the case, why am I selling signs? So I have a sign company, which has provided me a great life in San Francisco, a really great life. It sustained me and allows me to be here today. But I've never been passionate about signs. What I get passionate about is ideas. And if you were to ask me to define the job of a legislator, legislators are salespeople of ideas. Imagine me just pushing a cart down the street with ideas. Who will take my idea? 2 for 1 today. We say, literally, anyone who's got an idea and can put it into legal form. Sometimes you get it from the newspaper. Sometimes I dream it up myself. Sometimes Art remembers all this. He was an assemblyman, a very accomplished one. And sometimes community groups, activists bring you ideas. And if you can put it into legal form and you think it's got a chance of getting through the legislature, and you can sell it to a majority of your colleagues, that idea becomes law. And it's a very thrilling experience and a very gratifying experience. And it allows one the opportunity to tikkun olam, to the repair of the world. So I raised money for Tim Wolford when he was running for the school board. I raised money for friends who were running for public office. I raised money for ballot measures. And I raised some money for Willie Brown's first mayoral campaign in 1995, which brought me to his attention, because if Willie pays attention to anything, it's money. And so there was a vacancy on the county board in 1998, and he offered me the appointment. And so that's how I got into public office. Very fortunate, through the back door. It was not on my to-do list in life. I never would have run for office. So it's, as we say in the Jewish tradition, it was beshert that I would suddenly be an elected official, a public official. And I was very ambivalent at first, I didn't know that I could keep my business going, putting 80 hours a week into City Hall, a job that paid $30,000 a year. I had a couple of mortgages. I couldn't afford to lose my business. I would have sunk completely. I'd never done any public policy before. I just knew how to raise money. And I didn't know that I'd be any good at it. I didn't want to fall on my face in a public fashion. So there was good reason to be ambivalent, but in short order, I realized that I was a closet policy wonk. I loved public policy, I still do to this day, and that I was pretty good at it. And soon that ambivalence became an ambition. And there was an open seat in the State Assembly in 2002, and I ran for it, and I won. And so then I had the good fortune of serving 6 years in the State Assembly, and then at the end of that period, there was an opportunity to run for the State Senate. And then I had 8 more years in Sacramento. So 14 years. I loved every minute of it. It was a privilege. It was an honor. I want to encourage any of you who are even considering community or public service to consider elected office, because we need caring, intelligent, well-informed, well-educated folks doing these jobs. We see the kind of people who are getting into the House of Representatives these days, and it's kind of scary. So we need you. We need you very much. So that's how I got into public office and got to Sacramento. The 2 bills, and I know we're running out of time already. I don't know how much I'll be afforded, but I'll try and get through this. Before I got to Sacramento in 1999, I was able to author a piece of local legislation. And isn't it interesting that a little something never done before anywhere in the United States that we did in San Francisco, just impacting San Francisco, a local ordinance, had great ramifications. What the ordinance did and does is provides equal access to our county health plan for county transgender employees. All the health plans excluded any transgender health care. That's just the way it was, both for public institutions and private health plans. And working with a transgender civil rights implementation task force, which my office assembled, their top priority, looking at all of the hardships of the transgender community in terms of access to education, to housing, to employment, to health care. They chose this health care issue as the #1 priority, and that's why we move forward with it. So it was about accessing health care. We had 17 transgender employees at the time. So it was a minimal universe. But every headline screamed, San Francisco to pay for sex change operations. And as a result of it, I got a call from Bill O'Reilly at Fox, would I come on his show? Now, many of you won't know who he is because he was fired for sexual improprieties and tens of millions of dollars that Fox had to pay because of the things that he did. But he was yesterday's Tucker Carlson. So you have a sense of how he operated. So I was on his show, and of course, the first thing out of his mouth, bellicose as could be, supervisor. Why should my tax dollars go to pay for someone's sex change operation? I said, well, Bill, that's not exactly what we're doing. Let me explain. If you're a non-transgender employee of the city and county of San Francisco, and you're in need of hormonal treatment or psychiatric treatment, you need a mastectomy or a hysterectomy, the county health plan pays for all of it. But if you're a transgender employee in need of the identical medical care, the plan pays for none of it. And when I finished, Bill O'Reilly said, Supervisor, you make a compelling argument. So, that's a victory. So a few years later, when I got to Sacramento, my first year in 2003, thanks to Art's leadership going back to 1977 as an assemblyman, 1 year after California's legislature and governor repealed the felony definition of adult consensual same-gender relations, it was a felony. California finally repealed that. Well, once that was done, Art introduced a bill, AB 1, to add sexual orientation to our Fair Employment and Housing Act, FEHA, which prohibits discrimination on race, creed, color, nation of origin, language that you speak. Is a long list. Art attempted to add sexual orientation, 1977. And I don't know all the history of all the votes, but it got reintroduced every year because it wasn't getting signed into law. AB 1, AB 101, AB 1, it went on for years. It took 22 years after 1977 to get it signed into law in 1999, but we hadn't added gender identity. And so I had the honor of introducing that bill in 2003. It had been authored by another colleague of mine, Jackie Goldberg from Los Angeles, a year before. That was the first attempt. And it wasn't managed well, and it got labeled the drag queen bill. So disrespectful, because we all understand there are differences. And so I tried again, and we were able to get it passed. And Gray Davis was in the midst of a recall and looking for friends that October when he was signing bills. And I don't know if he would have signed it otherwise, but he signed it into law. Thank you, Gray Davis. But that year, as every year in the Assembly, there's a floor ceremony. Every member of the Assembly is allowed to bring a woman from his or her district to honor Woman of the Year. And given that I had a close friendship with a woman named Teresa Sparks, a transgender woman, who worked with us on our Transgender Civil Rights Implementation Task Force, I asked Teresa if she would receive the honor of being our Woman of the Year. And so she came to Sacramento, and I specifically walked her up and down the aisle of the Assembly floor to shake the hands of every one of my colleagues, because they'd never met a transgender woman before, and I wanted to put a face to the bill so they knew we were talking about a human being, many human beings, and why we needed to protect them from discrimination in housing, employment, and public services. So Teresa accepted, and we did that, and we got it signed into law. So I don't know if there's... I guess how much time do I have, Rabbi? 1 minute. So I won't have time to be able to share with you the wonderful stories that made up our effort, first of its kind in the nation, to provide equal marriage rights.
Oh, you have 2 minutes.
Through the legislative process. Most of you know, because it was a current history, that it finally became law of the land through court cases, and finally the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court. But we were able to get it to the governor's desk first in 2005, and then in 2007. Arnold Schwarzenegger vetoed it in 2005. We garnered even more legislative support in 2007 and got it to his desk a second time. Keep in mind that as he was denying us the ability to take marriage vows with the individual that we loved, he was screwing around with the housekeeper under his wife's roof and impregnating his wife and his housekeeper simultaneously, and had 2 children at the same time. That's when Maria left him, and good for you, Maria. But no other state had done that. It would have changed the course of history. We don't have time to get into that. I think I've probably gone on long enough. It's been a great honor. Again, just to end on the quote of Harvey Milk, hope will never remain silent. And it is your voice and our voices that will keep that hope alive. Hold on to it tightly. It's everything. Thank you very much. You coming up? So this is Norman. He was one of my 3 students this past year. I'll let him introduce himself.
Yes. All right, so hello everybody. Thank you so much for coming. So my name is Norman Fang and my pronouns are he, him, his. I am a senior nursing major here at the University of San Francisco. It is such a great honor standing in front of such a big audience to be able to present the legacy project that was created to honor Mark Leno, his life, and his work. Thanks to Rabbi Camille Angel and her class honoring our LGBTQIA+ religious elders, the class that I took last semester, Josue, Alyssa, and I were able to meet such an amazing person and learn about how much he has impacted and improved the situation for all LGBTQIA+ identifying individuals within California. I cannot express how appreciative I am to share this legacy video with all of you, and without further ado, here it is, and I hope you all enjoy it.
Thank you, Norman. Okay, and I'm Mark. Hello. Good to meet you all. So,
Throughout the semester, we had the great privilege of learning more about Mark Leno's life, journey, and accomplishments. Through this legacy video, we hope to highlight these accomplishments and our appreciation for everything he has done to better the climate for the LGBTQIA+ community in California. Without further ado, we present you with the life and legacy of Mark Leno. Chapter 1: Early Life and Upbringing.
I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's a city of just under 1 million people, so population-wise, about the size of San Francisco, but a very different kind of city. The population was made up of a lot of German immigrants, a lot of Polish immigrants, and my family was part of a large Russian Jewish wave of immigration. So my parents were born there, my 2 sisters and I were born there mid-century, and I was blessed with a really great childhood, loving parents, good public schools, all the things that count.
Chapter 2: Coming Out and Coming to Terms. In terms of Mark Leno's experience with coming out, he describes himself as a Stonewall baby as he came out as gay in 1969 when he was just 18 years old. This was a difficult time for him as many people in his hometown, school, and family had no idea what it meant to be gay since it was such a foreign concept. This was the case when he experienced homophobia during high school and when his father did not understand or support him when he first came out. However, Mark and his father reconciled years later and he became a loving supporter. Besides this, he was still able to receive support throughout his early life from his mother, siblings, and different friends, including JP, Gary, and Chucky, known as the Radical Queens, back at the University of Wisconsin. Lastly, staying true to his roots in Reform Judaism, Mark came to terms with his sexuality through Hebrew prayers, including, "Blessed are you, Creator of the universe, who has made me according to thy will." This allowed him to be unapologetically himself.
And I remember that prayer in particular, as I was coming out, when there were so many negative voices in my head and surrounding me at every turn, that there's a Hebrew prayer that says specifically, "I am made according to thy will." There's no mistake here. This is who I am and how I'm supposed to be.
Chapter 3: Undergraduate Education.
I was not all that focused on my undergraduate studies, but I had great experiences. I spent my first year in college at the University of Colorado in Boulder. My sophomore year, I spent at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee, and I went to the American College in Jerusalem, which it's no longer operating. It was a small private college in Jerusalem, Israel. So I finished my last 3 semesters in Jerusalem. I did find a major finally, psychology.
Chapter 4, Postgraduate Education.
I decided I wanted to continue postgraduate studies in a rabbinic program in New York City. It was of Reform Judaism, which is how I was raised and my parents. I entered into the Hebrew Union College first-year program as a rabbinical student. It was a 5-year postgraduate program, and within a few months I realized, this isn't working for me. And so I dropped out. I'm a rabbinic dropout.
Chapter 5, Revivification in San Francisco.
1977. I had a sister at Stanford at the time, and I remember she had written me this letter that said, get out of that cold, dirty city, come to California and revivify. That's the word she used, not a word you hear very often. And I moved to San Francisco, February of 77. And within a year, I invested a relatively small amount of money to open a sign company called Budget Signs.
Chapter 6, Douglas Jackson.
In the spring of 1980, a young man walked into my sign shop, and we became life partners for 10 years. His name was Douglas Jackson, most beautiful man in the world, and we really hit it off. And Doug worked with me in the business from 1985 until he died of AIDS in 1990. I've been a single man since.
Chapter 7, Ambivalence Turned to Ambition. As a person who engaged in a lot of volunteer work and community service for LGBTQIA+ organizations, democratic organizations, and different nonprofits, Mark discovered his natural talent for fundraising, which allowed him to form many connections within the political world. Specifically, he got involved with local ballot measures and fundraising for political figures that were important to him. Eventually, to start his political journey, in 1998, he was offered and accepted a spot on the County Board of Supervisors by Mayor Brown, despite feeling ambivalent about the appointment and doing this new job. This was because he had no background in public policy and he was uncertain that he could keep his business running at the same time. However, with experience, this ambivalence quickly turned into ambition as Mark continued his journey by being elected in 2002 to the California State Assembly. Eventually, he then became the first openly gay man elected to the state Senate. Chapter 8, We Needed to Fight a War Over a Word.
Of course, of all the hundreds and hundreds of bills and probably thousands of issues that I engaged in over the years, the marriage bill was probably one of the most, if not the most exciting. Initially, on the issue of equal marriage rights, I had always wanted, first as an activist and then as an elected official, I always wanted the bottom line for myself and for my community. The same rights, benefits, and privileges of marriage, along with the same obligations and responsibilities. But I didn't know that we needed to fight a war over a word.
After the Knight Initiative defined marriage as only between a man and a woman in California in year 2000, and the 2003 Massachusetts court case which stated that there was no basis for same-sex couples to be excluded from marriage through domestic partnerships and other alternatives, Mark was motivated to fight a war over a word as he believed that it was absurd to have the government determine who loves good enough for marriage license standards and who doesn't. Because of this, Mark worked with Equality California and Executive Director Jeff Coors to propose a bill that would change the definition of marriage in the family code.
And what our bill would do would change the family code to read that marriage is a civil contract that arises out of the relationship between two people, non-gender specific.
As Mark was ready to present the bill at the Speaker's office in February of 2004, the Winter of Love occurred in San Francisco, where Mayor Gavin Newsom began distributing marriage licenses to same-sex couples in City Hall. This was a revolutionary time, as thousands of same-sex couples received marriage licenses despite it being deemed as unconstitutional by the California Supreme Court. However, after President George Bush presented the idea of having the Constitution define marriage as only between a man and a woman during his State of the Union address in 2004, Mark continued with the bill and all of the necessary pieces to put it into action after it was postponed. However, it was vetoed twice by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. Despite these setbacks, Mark was one of the few who paved the way towards the legalization of same-sex marriage in California. Chapter 9, FIHA and Gender Identity. In 2003, Mark was inspired to amend the FIHA bill, also known as the Fair Employment and Housing Act, so that it would include the words of gender identity, which would prohibit this kind of discrimination. To provide some context, in 1999, sexual orientation was included in the bill, but half of the LGBTQIA+ community were left out since gender identity was not present. To advocate for this amendment, Mark invited Teresa Sparks, a proud transgender woman, to Sacramento as his Woman of the Year.
So Teresa came to Sacramento, and I specifically walked her up and down every aisle of the assembly floor. And to look into the eye of my legislative colleague, and so Teresa could offer her hand and look into the eye of that legislative colleague and say, "It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Teresa Sparks. I'm Assemblyman Leno's Woman of the Year." And it was certainly an honor worthy of Teresa, but also I imagined it could have benefit for the passage of our bill adding gender identity to the Fair Employment and Housing Act.
Chapter 10, Tikkun Olam. Tikkun Olam is a concept in Judaism that stands for the repair of the world. Overall, I believe that Mark Leno strongly embodies this concept, as he has dedicated so much of his life towards making the world a better place for all people. Having Mark Leno as my elder was an amazing opportunity, as I learned so much more about how he helped make California a better place for the LGBTQIA+ community. As someone who does not know much about politics, it was fascinating and inspiring to hear the behind-the-scenes stories about Mark's involvement and how hard he fought so that later generations could have the chance of living a more equal and fulfilling life. Despite all of the challenges that Mark has gone through throughout his entire life, I am glad to have gone to know him as a politician, entrepreneur, and gay role model. Because of this, I thank you, Mark, for everything you have done, and I dedicate this legacy video to you.
How's it going, Mark? I just wanted to say that it has been an honor to speak with you, learn about your history and your experiences in life. I truly do appreciate you being able to and willing to open up to us and share the many aspects of your life, being able to answer all of our questions that we had as well. I personally have learned a great deal from you, and this experience has been really wonderful for me. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you, Mark, for being my elder. This opportunity has been extremely helpful in further understanding topics relating to LGBTQIA+ history. I am consistently impressed by your positive attitude, dedication, compassion, and wisdom. Thank you for everything you've done for the community and for me personally. You're an amazing role model.
So we're out of time in terms of questions and answers this evening, but I do want to call Pam and Robert up to say a few closing words.
Wow. This is so heartwarming, meaningful, and you know that it's the second year since Al passed, and I'm just starting to really understand the depth of the loss I feel and heartbreak. But I've got to tell you, what Camille put together, what Mark said, what Art said, Al would be thrilled. He would be dancing. He would be so honored and happy that you all showed up, that this lecture series is happening on his behalf. And for me, I'm completely honored and humbled by the legacy he left me to continue in our name, his and mine. And I wouldn't have been able to continue without Pam's help. And I just want to thank her. Camille, thank you, honey. And Mark, that was beautiful. Thank you so much.
You know, after Al died and we did a Zoom funeral, Shiva, I don't remember what day it was, but I had this incredible image of Al and my wife Cheryl, who had died about 8 months earlier, dancing together. And I think they both are tonight as well. We do this, Robert and I do this, because Al was an example of Tikkun Olam in the way that he could as a gay man of his generation, as a philanthropist of his generation, as a civic leader of his generation. And we started this really pretty simply because of the role that the rabbi played in our lives and what she has really taught me about pastoral leadership, regardless of religion, but the importance of having this rabbi-in-residence program here at USF, the openness of USF to house this program and hopefully continue to support it is so important, because that is the future. The future is interfaith, the future is multiracial, multi-fluid, everything, and it's you all. So thanks for being here. Thank you for my friends for being here and all of you.
Thank you so much. This concludes our evening. Yes.